So good morning or good afternoon to everyone who's joined this webinar this morning. I know all of you have very busy schedules, so I do really appreciate everyone's time today. I'll do my best to complete the webinar in the scheduled time frame, so we have an hour. Hopefully that's according to everyone's expectations. And for those of you who don't know me, my name is Davis Mathai. I'm a solutions architect for Cireson within the EMEA region, so Europe, Middle East and Africa. And today the session is around utilizing Microsoft System Center Service Manager to manage your IT service management requirements and some of the best practices in utilizing that for it. So the scope of this webinar isn't a very deep technical dive. So hopefully some of you are looking to move to Service Manager, and maybe some of you already have Service Manager. But most of all, hopefully all of you will have something or gain something out of today's webinar to take forward into your own environments. So before we move on to the main part of the webinar, just a couple of housekeeping points. So the webinar is being recorded. So I'm recording it right now, and later on in the day, or maybe early tomorrow, it should be posted up onto our Vimeo site for review later on if you feel like it, if you want to review it again. If you do have any questions, please do use the questions panel within your GoToWebinar utility. Post them into there. I won't review the questions as I go through the presentation, as it's only myself presenting today from Cireson. But if you do have any questions, post them into the questions box, and we'll come to them towards the end of the webinar. We'll try and have at least 10 minutes to go through these questions. So with that being said, let's make a start into the webinar. We've got a few slides to go through first, so hopefully none of you mind that. The agenda for today is to firstly give you an overview of Cireson. Hopefully all of you have heard of Cireson before. But for those of you, maybe you'll find that interesting in terms of some of the history behind Cireson. Then we'll do a bit of a service manager overview from a few slides, and then a bit of a demonstration as well on Service Manager, as well as some of the Cireson applications that enable Service Manager to be extended even further. And then we'll talk about some of the recommendations, particularly around using connectors to bring data into Service Manager, as well as the use of management packs within the system. And then finally, we'll talk around how you can use or how to best manage the lifecycle of Service Manager. So thinking about how you do development within it, how you might migrate within different environments or to newer versions. And then finally, as I mentioned, we'll have some time for question and answers as well at the end. So do please post your questions as we go through the webinar. So again, hopefully the majority of you have heard of us, but for those of you who haven't, Cireson was born in 2012 and we're headquartered out of the US in San Diego, in sunny California. So over the last 5 years, we have grown very fast because, and that's a great testament to the solutions, I guess, that we've provided to the industry. So now we have operations in over 60 countries, with over 1,200 customers who buy products from us. We have a services arm, a solutions consultancy business, and they've delivered over 43,000 consulting hours across the last 5 years. And one of the things that we're really proud of across the business is our renewal rate. So 99% of our customers, those who bought solutions from us, do renew with us on an annual basis. So I guess that's, and I'm really happy to share that with you, because that's something that we're really proud of. Another thing that we're really proud of over the last year, so in 2016 we had a year of recognition really across the industry. So we had some great recognition across some of these bodies, including Inc. 500, so some of the fastest growing companies in the USA. We've been recognized by CIO Review for our asset management solution. So some of these things have been really great over the last year, and again, a testament to the great work done by some of the product teams, I guess, within the business. So that's a quick introduction to Cireson. Now talking more around some of the topics that we want to discuss today, so Service Manager being the key one. I don't think we can really talk about Service Manager without talking about how it integrates within the greater System Center suite. So hopefully all of you are familiar with the different products within System Center. I'm not going to spend too long in talking about each of them. A System Center Configuration Manager is a great product and probably one of the most utilized products within System Center, used across a huge range of companies globally. So I think we have 120,000 customers, Microsoft customers who use Configuration Manager. And again, there's other products within the System Center suite like Operations Manager to enable that enterprise monitoring of your data center, even your client estate, monitoring the different servers, switches, routers, all the different capabilities of monitoring different applications as well, and alerting of those on any issues as you've configured them within the system. There's a couple of other maybe less well-used solutions maybe. So Data Protection Manager, not so well known, a product to enable you to do backup and recovery of your systems, not just System Center obviously, but across your different server estates. And also things like Virtual Machine Manager to enable you to manage those virtualization environments, not just Microsoft Hyper-V, but across different hypervisors as well. Thinking about some of those really great, so some of the benefits that people realize is around automating some of those business processes that you have within your organization. And System Center Orchestrator, as well as SMA, so Service Management Automation, a newer version of that, that works very much on PowerShell. That solution is very much around integrating the different System Center solutions as well as other technologies that you may have within your business, integrating them into using various integration and process automation solutions to enable you to get rid of some of that manual effort that you probably take right now in fulfilling some of your business activities. The Service Manager is, as I like to say, it's the glue that holds System Center together. So it sits in the center, and it can take data sets from all of the System Center products, as well as other solutions that you may have within your business. We can take data from a wide range of products. System Center is great, but where System Center really does, or Service Manager really does have the benefits, is where you extend it to enable greater functionality, and that's where Cireson comes in. So what we've done over the years is really extend some of the capabilities of System Center from a service management perspective, so enabling your analysts, your service desk, to use Service Manager in a more efficient way, in a more dynamic way. Also extending Service Manager to be more of an enterprise CMDB, which we'll touch on in a second. So we can enable through the asset management module from Cireson to enable Service Manager to become an enterprise CMDB as well. So in all of these things, Service Manager, System Center, all of these products can be hosted either on-premise in your own data center or in the cloud with things like Microsoft Azure IaaS. So like I said, Service Manager really comes into its own and has the biggest benefit when you start relying on it as a enterprise CMDB. And it has all the building blocks to enable you to do this. So configuration items from the enterprise can be related to each other. It's a relational database. Assets can be created and updated and related to work items such as incidents, change, service requests. The platform itself is also highly extensible, and it can be customized to take on almost any type of CI class. So if you don't have that out of the box, you can customize it to enable that as well. So we've already mentioned that Service Manager sits in the central System Center. So with connectors from products within the System Center suite, connectors into Active Directory, or even third-party solutions that products like Cireson enable, so you can bring in data from various other data sets. You can bring all these data sets into the system and also keep them up to date on a scheduled basis. So you have a very current set of data within the CMDB that you can make and enable better business decisions through. So you may already have a service management solution, a ticketing solution, a service desk solution within your business, but Service Manager still has a use as a CMDB. So what we're finding a lot of our customers are doing is they may have another service desk solution, other products. There are many products out there for ticketing and service desk, but then they still use Service Manager because it's included in their licenses, and it's also got a great CMDB engine. use that for integration and automation across maybe the data center or even the client-side estate from a service catalog perspective. So we have many customers starting to do this now as well. The benefit of all of this is that the CMDB provides a foundation for any of, like I've said, your asset or service management strategies. And Service Manager has a natural advantage here because it brings both of these initiatives, asset and service management, together in one single pane of glass in a single platform. So again, hopefully this slide sort of highlights how a CMDB can be useful through to delivering that self-service, so even to your end users, so enabling that adoption of the system within your business and your end users to be able to request that service, as well as request or report issues, or take advantage of the data sets. Depending on their roles, you may have reports that you want them to run, or see the different data sets that you have within the CMDB. You can slice and dice that based on your roles and provide those to the end users. And again, we'll try and touch on some of those things as we go through this presentation today. So before we move on to a bit more on the from a demonstration perspective, which is probably going to be more interesting, hopefully, for all of you, just to baseline what we talk about from a service management perspective. So the best service management tool sets manage all of these different processes. So those of you who know ITIL will be familiar with some of these terminologies. So things like managing incidents and problems, change and release, self-service and automation, so your service catalog potentially, through to managing the service level, so service level objectives, SLA management, knowledge management, asset management. All of these different parts are constituent to your service management initiatives. So the best service management tool sets do take or do allow you to manage all, or at least the majority of these ITIL capabilities, or ITIL processes even. And again, Service Manager is a fantastic solution because it does enable you to manage all of these different ITIL processes within the toolset. So without further ado, let's swing over to the demonstration section. So hopefully you can see my lab environment here. So if I just get this set up to talk around the best parts. So let's go into the full screen here so you can see a bit more of the real estate. So this is the Service Manager console for those of you who aren't familiar with it, those of you who haven't seen it before. So the layout, you have a few workspaces. So when you have the data warehouse things configured, so I don't have that in my library, you have additional nodes within this, but everyone will have 4 nodes as a minimum within their workspaces. So the administration workspace is probably not where the majority of your analysts or your service desk staff will sit in. It's probably going to be hidden for most of them, but this is where you configure the majority of the settings within Service Manager. So to start off with, you have things like your connectors, the ability to use the out-of-the-box connectors from Service Manager to bring in the different data sets that you have. So in my lab, I have a connector into my Configuration Manager environment, so you can point it to SCCM, Configuration Manager, bring in the different data sets, point to the collections that are of interest. So again, we'll talk about best practices for connectors towards the end of the session. So don't use this as best practice, so don't just point it to your all systems collection to bring in the data sets or the information and Configuration Manager. We'll talk about best practices as well. And then you have the ability to schedule these connectors to keep that data that you have current within your system. So out of the box, Service Manager comes with a few connectors. So you have the AD connector to bring in data from Active Directory. You have your Configuration Manager connector. You have a couple of Operations Manager connectors to bring in, firstly, CI information. So you may want to have things like your routers and switches discovered by Operations Manager brought into Service Manager to manage them as assets. You can do that. You have the ability to connect into Virtual Machine Manager to bring in data from VMM, as well as Orchestrator to enable workflows and automation directly from Service Manager as well. What Cireson does as well is, with our asset management module, is enable you to bring in additional data sets. So we have asset management connectors as well as software metering connectors to bring in metering data from SCCM or Configuration Manager. But our asset import connector is extremely popular because it allows you to very flexibly and very dynamically bring in data sets from other data sources that you don't have access to with the out-of-the-box connectors. So the purpose of this webinar isn't to talk about asset management, but if we have some time at the end, I'll talk about some of the ways asset management or Cireson asset management enables you to leverage Service Manager in a greater way. So that's the connectors section. Or the other thing just to point out, so I'm not going to walk through every single node. The other thing to point out is the management packs. So the management packs in Service Manager are used to group together your customization, your settings, additional things that you bring into Service Manager to enable additional functionality within the platform. So Service Manager ships with a bunch of management packs. You can see all of these with the lock. These are the sealed management packs which you can't change. The unsealed management packs can be exported, imported, backed up, and again we'll talk about some of these best practices for using management packs towards the end of this webinar as well. The key thing I say bear in mind is any customization that you do make sure you make them in your own management packs. Don't use out-of-the-box management packs wherever possible. Sometimes you can't, but in the majority of scenarios you should be using your own management packs, because then if Microsoft updates Service Manager, you don't have the risk of losing data because they've updated one of their out-of-the-box unsealed management packs. You have the ability to link into Exchange and other SMTP services to enable notifications, so you can send out alerts based on different criteria. You can send out email notifications when tickets are assigned. All of those good things that you want from a service management perspective, you can enable through Service Manager as well. So within the administration workspace, you have the security node. This is where you configure your various roles. So there's a bunch of roles that Microsoft ships with Service Manager, and for most customers, those are useful, and out of the box, there'll be 80% of the roles that you'd need, or the access that you'd need for the different users. But you have the ability to create custom roles as well. So I've got one in here for end users to enable them access to the different CIs within my environment. But this is where you configure the access to the system as well. You have the ability to manage your service levels within the system as well. So calendars and metrics are part of your service level management initiative. So your calendar is setting up for a specific service level, what days of the week potentially that and the times during those days contribute to your SLA or your SLO. Metrics is what you want to measure. And the service level objectives is marrying those two together to assign them against maybe different support groups that you may have within your business, and different criteria for measuring the service. So the thing to mention about SLOs, so there's a great temptation to create as many SLOs as you can within the system, and obviously you can create as many as you want. But the key thing to bear in mind is SLOs can have a huge impact on the performance of the system. So think carefully about what sort of service level objectives you want to measure and you want to report on within Service Manager. So one thing to bear in mind is each SLO that you creates about 6 workflows, I believe it is, within the system every time it runs. So each workflow requires processor, requires memory, requires potential connection to the database as well. So imagine if you have hundreds of these running within the system, they can definitely slow down the performance. So when you're thinking about designing the solution, make sure you think about the types of SLOs that you want to measure and use a minimum required to meet your business requirements. Then you have the settings node within the administration node, and again, this is where you configure the different settings for the different types of systems that you have, or different types of processes that you have within Service Manager. So I can configure the different incident settings. So one of the key things everyone wants to do is set the priority calculations. So how do you determine the priority of a ticket based on selections that you provide to the end user? So if I choose an impact of low and urgency of low, the priority is rated as 5 in my case. Obviously you can go up to 9 if you wanted to. So the higher the number, the lower the priority, and the lower the number, the higher the priority. So that's how we set up the calculations, and you can also set up target resolution times based on these priorities, and you can set those again through these settings. So all of the different options that you have within Service Manager, the settings are configured within the settings node. And again, any management packs that third-party vendors, so like Cireson, so we have a load of management packs, a load of customizations that you can bring into the system. All of those settings are managed through the settings node as well. And then finally, on the administration node, just to cover this off as well, is we have a status or a workflow node which shows you all the different workflows that you have within the system and the status of all of them. So you can see all the different workflows that have been set up within my lab environment. Potentially that can increase depending on the types of systems that you have. You can monitor the workflows that kick off and what's happening with the status against each of these individual workflows against in the bottom half of that panel here as well. So moving on to the next workspace, we have the library within the Service Manager console. And again, this is where you configure the various bits of information that you may want to use for work items. So again, here you have a range of different things you can configure. So you have the ability to configure your knowledge base articles. Lists is a really great way of configuring the enumeration value, so the custom list. So a great one to point out is if I bring up the incident. Whoops, I can type incident classification. So this is the where you would configure the different classification types for your incidents. So when you create a new incident, you have the ability to have these within a drop-down list to select the classification of that incident that you're creating. Now again, the temptation here is to create a whole range of incident classifications, and we've bumped into customers that use 10s, 20s, maybe even over 50 different classifications, and that's, while it's tempting and it allows you to have a very granular level of classification, from a usability perspective, that can be a bit of a challenge. So those analysts who are creating incidents potentially don't then work their way through the list and don't classify the incidents in a way that they should. So there's too many options for them to use properly. The other thing, just to mention, that you shouldn't really do wherever possible is use what I've done here and use something like other problems. So again, we've got customers who enable this, and 6 months down the line, when you start reporting on the classifications, you find that 70% of the work items that you've created have a classification of other. And again, that's not very useful from a reporting perspective. So again, think very carefully at the outset about the type of classifications that you want to use, because once you've started classifying systems or classifying work items, you can report on things much more easily down the line. So we've got the ability to create queues within this. So queues are is how we in Service Manager group similar work items that meet specific criteria. Again, the way you create queues, the scoping of those is one of the key ways in which you can manage or improve the performance of Service Manager as a whole. So again, think about the different classifications that you use when you create views. So Service Catalog isn't a topic for this webinar per se. So we do have another webinar coming up in a couple of weeks talking about how you can best create your Service Catalog. But Service Catalog is where you configure the different request offerings and service offerings that you may publish to your user base, so that they can request services, report on incidents, that kind of thing, from within the system. One of the most powerful pieces or powerful capabilities of Service Manager is a templates. So, when we talked about the slide with the CMDB, one of the key enablers of a CMDB is standardization. So Service Manager allows you to standardize a lot of those activities through templates. So if you have templates for how workflow should happen or how tickets should be created for incidents or service requests, you can pre-fill a lot of those forms through templates to enable you to ensure consistency across the way different people do activities within the system. So use templates as much as possible, and then they have very little load on the system, so use them. So then you can bring them in where relevant to enable your service desk or your analysts to leverage them to enable their lives to be made easier when they work in the system. Then if I move to configuration items next, so again, this may be an area, a workspace that you provide to some analysts. So this is where the data that you've brought in, potentially from your different connectors, are shown within the system. So out of the box you have, so if I've got the config manager connector running, I have the ability to view all of my Windows computers that it brings into the system. So if I find a PC, so this is one that's been brought in through my configuration manager connector. You can see the information that's brought in through configuration manager, things like the last inventory date. I can also assign primary users at this point. So if I wanted to assign myself as a primary user at this point, you can do that manually. Typically, the configuration manager connector also brings in the primary user that SCCM allocates to your computer records in Service Manager as well. So that's very useful. The other thing to mention from a CMDB perspective is the relationships between CIs and assets and the different types of CIs that you have within the database. So if I click on the software node, typically if I've got discovered software from Configuration Manager, that should show in my installed software list. This is a bad example. Let me see if the other one has something. Again, no, this one's not bringing any data through, but if I have another workstation, let's bring this one up. If I show you software, this is showing me all of the relationship software details from Configuration Manager or whatever source that you've imported from. As long as you've got those relationships, we can show that within the system. Again, worth noting is things like showing where work items or tickets have been created against a specific CI or asset that you have within the database. Again, that relationship information is really key to enable you to report on the service that you deliver to the organization. So, for example, if I had a bunch of tickets or incidents against this workstation, maybe it was for it restarting all the time or whatever, you can track that and you can use that in your vendor management strategy, so you can talk to the vendor about how this is happening consistently across the same type of models that you have within the estate. And all of that information where you've got the relationships, you can enable better management decisions based off the data that you have within the CMDB. So that's a quick overview of some of those relationships. You can relate users, computers, services, business services to your different computer records. You can relate knowledge base articles as well, so you can have different attachments to that data. And again, so this is the out-of-the-box view for computers, and I'll touch on how Cireson Asset Management improves that further if we have some time later on in this webinar. So that's configuration items. So you have the software users, so all of your users that have been imported from Service Manager or through the AD connector even into Service Manager are shown in this as well. So work items is probably where the majority of your analysts will live, and this is probably the node or the workspace that every single analyst will have access to. The other three you may not provide access to that often, but the work items is where you will see all of the different types of processes that you may want to manage. So if I just minimize all of these, whoops. So you have the ability to manage all your incident, problem, change, service request, release management, so all of the key ITIL processes. Again, you can see these are being catered for in these different views within the work items. So if I click on all incidents, this shows me all of the incidents that are in the system. So some of these views are all great to have. They give you the key bits of information, but where Cireson really adds value here is we enable additional configuration, additional customization through some of our applications to make the lives of your service desk analysts much more easy or better. So a key way we do that is we have loads of applications. I'm going to pick out a couple in this case. So the My Active Work items, so hopefully the majority of you are familiar with this, but the My Active Work items consolidates view views within all of the different out-of-the-box views that you have here into one view to show you all of the active work items that are assigned to yourself. So this one's scoped against me. So all of these IRs, the CR and this change request and the service request are all assigned to me. So I can see that very quickly within this. I also have the ability within my active work items is to click on the unassigned active work view to quickly see where all of these different service desk tickets, incident, service requests, change requests, whatever it is, manual activities, all of these where these are unassigned at present, so I can go in and assign them to myself and manage those as well. So I can assign it to myself if I wanted to and bring this into my queue. So that's a very simple way to enable better functionality within the system. The other thing, a common issue that customers have when managing work items in Service Manager is that process of resolving and then closing tickets. So by ITIL best practice recommendations, you don't go from an active ticket to a closed ticket. You go through a resolution process first, and then after resolution, you close that work item off fully. So one of the challenges in Service Manager is that if you don't have a process of manually going in and checking your resolved items and closing them off, those will sit in the resolved state permanently, indefinitely within the system. One of the ways Cireson enables you to get around that problem is through one of our free applications. So you have the auto close application. So if I go into my settings quickly, I have so this is a free application. So I can import the relevant management packs from my free download, and I can enable the ability for Service Manager to automatically close resolved work items based on the criteria that are set. So I can do it individually on incidents, problems, changes, whatever process that you're managing within your system, and you can set how often it runs and when it runs. So I can start enabling these. So if I OK this now, at midnight every day, any incidents that have been resolved over the last 7 days will automatically be closed off. So that's very useful and very simple workflow to enable really great functionality and deliver a lot of value and save a lot of time as well for your service desk staff. So a couple of ways in which we enable better work or better practices within Service Manager. So the other thing I just want to touch on quickly is views within Service Manager. So if my console's hanging a bit, so if I just, there we go, it's come back to life. So we have the ability within Service Manager out of the box to create custom views. So if I click on Incident Management, I have the ability to go and create a view out of the box. So this is useful, but better, I would say, is to use the Cireson View Builder. So just, a couple of things to point out as part of this. So let's go ahead and start the view creation process. So the first thing I'm going to do is give it a name. The other thing that we enable is the ability for you to create or use icons or customize the icon that you have for this view. So if I wanted to use something out of the Service Manager incident library, I can go ahead and choose that, and I have all the icons available to me. I can go and select the icon that I want to use, and you can see that's created for me. Again, I've got the management packs here listed. So best practice, again, create your custom management packs based on the type of work that you're doing within the system. So I've got one for demo custom views. That's the one I'm going to use. So all of my custom views sit within one management pack. That makes it easier for me to export and import into another system if I wanted to, without having to worry about all the different dependencies potentially. And then, like with the out-of-the-box view creator, I can then choose a different criteria for managing or showing the different data sets that I want. So I have the ability here, if I browse, to choose the different classes within Service Manager. So the first option I have is to use out-of-the-box frequently used basic classes. So this is, I can use that to create an incident view based on the different classes or the different properties that I have against that incident class. but it may be that I want to show additional information such as related information like who's the affected user. So if I just select this, I'll just show you. So these are different properties available on the default basic incident class. So I can't see my affected user. It's not shown on there. That's part of an additional combination class. So if I choose combination classes, I have the ability to see where these different type projections, as we call it in Service Manager, are related to the default incident class. So if I go to my incident classes, I have the advanced class, combination class, which shows me all of the relationships that are available on the incident. So I can go ahead and then straight away in my incident, I have the ability to use affected user as a criteria, as a property that I can run or use for defining that view. I also have the ability to, by clicking on that chevron, twirly, whatever you want to call it, I can see all of the different related classes. So I can go ahead and select assigned to user or affected user and see the different properties on those classes as well, and build up the view based on that. This is great, and obviously it gives you a very deep level of functionality. But the key thing to bear in mind here is, along with queues, the views, the scoping of views is probably one of the biggest impacts on performance within Service Manager. So wherever possible, use the simplest scoping for your classes that you want to get the data from. So if you just want to get affected user out of this combination class, it may not be best to use the advanced incident combination class to do that. You may have other more simple combination classes to use. So things like, so Cireson, we build a lot of combination classes to enable our applications to work more efficiently and quickly without having to rely on the default out of the box huge combination classes. So if I have something like my active work items, whoops, I shouldn't have clicked on that, sorry. My active work items, I still have the ability, whoops, go back into this, apologies for this, let's go back to my, and search for incidents. So I have different combination classes from Cireson because I've imported the management packs to enable me to see additional bits of information that I want to relate to. So if I choose that, I straight away have the ability to show the classes that are related to my incident, but in a more simple way. The benefit of this is every time someone runs that view, we're not querying every single related class within the database, and we can improve performance of the system. So again, the recommendation with queues, so if you don't take anything else away, just think about this from today. Restrict the scoping of your views and your queues to as minimum as you need to get away with the information that you need. So again, that's the key recommendation, I guess, for this part. And then from a view builder perspective, again, to differentiate with the way the out-of-the-box view creations, if I just select a few data sets that I want to show as part of this view, I can go to the column options, and then I have the ability to customize how they're displayed. So I can display actual work hours as work hours instead of showing the actual, whoops, instead. So I have the ability to customize how they're shown within the view, so it makes it more relevant to the person who's running the reports or the views. So it's a great way of enabling that functionality within Service Manager. So I can create this view if I click OK. Obviously this is a randomly selected bunch of columns without any criteria, so the view's not going to work, so I'm going to hit cancel. But that's how you can use a Cireson view builder to show the different data sets that you have within Cireson. So the other thing from a performance perspective, so a bit more obscure, I guess, is the entity changelog. So those of you who've used Service Manager 2012 may be aware that you couldn't configure the entity changelog, or in the sense that you couldn't configure it not to be used. So the entity changelog is, so if you have connectors, so I've got a connector that brings in data from Configuration Manager. So if I go back to one of those CI or the CIs that I've brought in from Configuration Manager, here we go. If I open this up, if I go to the history tab, you'll see that for every, not even for every time the connectors run, I've got a record in the history against every single property change that has been written by the connector. Now, it may be useful for some of you to see that level of data, but typically we don't really want to capture that information for every single property that the connector is changing or writing to the database. The other challenge of the ECL, the entity change log, is the fact that that log, that data set within the database can be extremely large, and it can grow over time significantly. The other thing it does is slow down your connector performance. So one of the challenges a lot of customers have is a slowness in which a connector completes its running phase and brings in the data that you want to, especially in larger data sets. With large AD environments and large configuration manager environments, those connectors can take a long time to run. So you can disable ECL using a registry change within on your management server, and that can significantly improve the performance of your connectors and the data that's captured within the database and kept within the database in terms of that log. So that's another recommendation we can make for those of you who use System Service Manager 2016. So again, it's not available in 2012 R2, but in 2016 Microsoft enabled you to disable ECL to improve performance. So that's ECL quickly. Hopefully some of you have heard of that before, but if you haven't, hopefully that was useful. The other thing from a performance perspective to think about is, as a minimum, you should think about having separate servers, management servers for your workflows and for your consoles. So where we mentioned workflows, you can think of all of these different workflows that get initiated as part of the different processes that run within Service Manager. All of these are intents on the database, the CPU, the RAM of the management server. And typically what you don't want is also all of the queries that run when someone opens a console, runs these different views. You don't want them to be hitting the management server as well at the same time. So what we say is have at least one server that does the workflows and have another one that takes care of the console connections from the different analysts that you have within your business. So do that as a minimum. The other thing that I'd like to point out is Microsoft provide a sizing guide to Service Manager. It's a spreadsheet. It's a really useful spreadsheet just to give you a good view of what you can get access to within or how you can size Service Manager better. So it's a guidance more than hard and fast rules. So if you Google Service Manager job aids, or Bing or whatever search engine you use, go to Service Manager job aids, and you should be able to get a zip file from Microsoft that contains this sizing. So it's very useful because you can go into the different nodes, see the typical types of end users, number of incidents per month, computers, etc., that you may want to cater for. Click on that and it will show you some of the key sizing metrics that you want to use for sizing your servers. So this was created off the back of System Center 2012 R2. But again, a lot of these sizing recommendations apply to your 2016 environment as well. So if you want to use 2016, again, you can still use this. And I can change some of these criteria. So if I wanted to say, if I think in my case, on average, I'll get 10 work items incidents from each computer or each user, I can do that, and you can see the database sizing has changed. So again, I would encourage you to download these, and you can see how Microsoft recommends you to architect your solution. So it could be useful for many of you. So the key thing, again, from a sizing perspective, more than the number of users or computers that you have within the system, think about the number of work items that you're going to be creating on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. That's probably more relevant to your sizing guide than the number of devices or users within your business. Just a quick overview of the Sizer tool. So again, I'd encourage you to download that and use it if you don't have it already. So the other thing I want to show you then is how, from a usability perspective, we as Cireson really enable better usability of Service Manager through some of our additional offerings for service management through our web portal. So again, hopefully a lot of you are aware of our web portal offerings for Service Manager. But again, for those of you who aren't, I just wanted to show you some of these things very quickly. So if I log into my portal, so I'm logging in as an admin here, so I've got all of the nodes available to me to show you. But I can, through this portal, allow end-user self-service. So the self-service side of the Cireson portal is free of charge. So if you're not using it, again, I encourage you strongly to download that, put it into your environment, and enable better end-user self-service. So I can publish my request offerings through the Cireson portal. As an analyst, I also have the ability to see my work, so everything assigned to me. So we talked about my active work items within the console. Out of the box in Service Manager, or out of the box in the Cireson portal even, we enable that my active work items view very easily. So my work shows me everything assigned to myself. I can go into any specific incident. I can start working on that. I can manage that as I would within the Service Manager console. But the best thing about this is we aren't reliant on the Service Manager console performance to manage all of these work items. We have a cached version of our own data of the Service Manager database that sits behind the portal to enable much better performance for your analysts as they work through their day-to-day tickets. And you'll be familiar, if you've seen the form in Service Manager within the console, all of those key bits of information that you want to capture is available through the form on the portal as well. So I can capture the support groups, urgency, impact, all of those good things, as well as all of the different activities that are happening. If there are different workflows that are going to be taking place as part of this work item, I can see that. I can see related items, see what the resolution state is, and what's happening in terms of the time worked, as well as even through all the way to the history of that ticket. I can view that through the portal as well. Again, very useful. And again, from a relationship perspective, because we are built on a service, on a CMDB with a relational database, I can have the ability, if I have an affected user, say if I use Davis Mathai here as the affected user, I can also see the affected users. I can relate it to the affected CIs or the items, the assets that may be related to me. So from Configuration Manager Connector, I have that Davis is a primary user of these two devices. I know this is a server, I know this is a workstation, so most likely this is going to be my related asset for this ticket, so I can relate that very quickly. If I only had one, automatically that relationship would have been mapped, so you can quickly see the affected device as part of that ticket creation process. So again, that's available through the console, but it's much easier to use, much quicker to use through this portal as well. The other key benefit that the portal allows us to have is reporting. So one of the biggest challenges of Service Manager out of the box is the reporting. So you have to rely on custom reports created in SQL Server reporting services, or in Power BI or whatever other reporting solution you may use. You have to create some of those yourself to be able to report on the service levels, the activities within Service Manager. What we do within the Cireson portal is we have an application called Analytics. So Analytics is another database that we provide, and that allows you to create custom dashboards as well as use the out-of-the-box. So we provide a bunch of out-of-the-box reports for current, so active stuff, as well as trend, looking through some of the historic data as well. We provide that out of the box for you. All of these reports can be edited. All these dashboards can be edited, customized for your own needs as well. Or you can copy the query that underlies some of these and create your own charts. So you can see all of that information is available to me very easily, very nice to see, and easily presentable to different user groups within your business. So you can scope any of these charts based on user roles to give the right people access to the right reports. The other thing that Analytics really does really well, or really enables, is the ability to connect to external data sources. So I've got a custom graph dashboard created here, where I've connected into my Configuration Manager database, my SCCM database, and I'm bringing in some installation data. So I've got all of my different vendors and the installation count by vendor. what I can then do is enable this chart to be clicked through, so I can click on a column and I can see the underlying data against that. So again, a very strong enabler for your reporting needs through the Cireson portal and using Cireson Analytics through the portal as well. From a request management perspective, just wanted to touch on this as well. I just wanted to show you the advanced request offering capabilities that we have. So Service Manager out of the box has very good request offering capabilities, but the forms are static. Cireson, with the advanced request offering, enables you to have dynamic forms to be able to request services, request assets, but also report issues potentially. So in this case, I'm linking into my asset management database. So my catalog items within Cireson. So if I choose a phone, I have the requirement for do I need a case, when do I need it by, as well as selecting a manager for approval through my system. But if I choose a laptop, in this case, it's changed. The options have changed. Do I need a docking station is the option here. I can choose the different software assets that I have within my software asset management database in Cireson. I can choose those as part of the request process, and then I also have to choose an approver. So I can search for, so if I'm a marketing user, I can search for my marketing users. This is my manager, I can say, and then I can provide the data. So if I select the data I need it by as well, I can then save that, and it creates my service request for me in the system using the different templates that you've created in the background. So anything that you may have wanted. So if I click on that newly created service request, I can see all the information against that. So the best part of this is the related items, or one of the best parts. So I can see all of the related items that I've selected because these are related to CIs, users, assets within my database. I can use this for automation down the line. So pick up these values that I've discovered through Orchestrator and then automate some of the delivery of these through to the end user if required. So we're running short on time. I just wanted to quickly touch on asset management. So instead of using the out-of-the-box computers view, what we can say is on top of those, take those computers within the computers view and create assets of each of those. And the benefit of using the Cireson asset management system, so if I go into one of those things that I've picked up before, so we showed this workstation before as part of the discovery, as part of the computers view, you can see that form is a lot more rich, a lot more capable. So I have the ability to see all of the default information from config manager, but I also have the ability to relate to the different business and financial data that I have as well. So the location information, organization information, I can relate to warranties, contracts, licenses. I have a finance tab to manage costs, to relate POs, purchase orders, invoices, all of those things, and with anything with a date. So if I have a purchase order with an end or a contract with an end date, I can report on those. I can alert on those as well through the out-of-the-box notification channels. It's a very quick touch on the asset management capabilities of Cireson. If that's something that is of interest to any of you on this webinar, please do reach out, and we can show you more details or provide trials as relevant. So that's an overview of some of the platform. Got a couple of other slides around the best practice. So if I just swing over to the slides again. Please do, like I said, post any questions that you may have, and we can get to them in about 5 minutes. Got 3 slides to cover off around best practice recommendations. So again, data retention is key. So as you start using Service Manager, obviously you expect the work items, the volume of work items to increase, and as that increases, inevitably the performance of the system is going to get a bit slower. So previous tests by Microsoft, so some of the things I can share with you. So tested with assumptions of 50,000 users in an organization, with 2 IRs created per month per user, with a 3-month retention. So Service Manager obviously has a data warehouse database, which is the historic data that you may want to capture and retain within for reporting purposes. Out of the box, data is groomed from the production live database into the data warehouse in 3 months. Microsoft has tested for approximately 750 work items in the live database. So assuming you keep within that, so if you have 10,000 users and 3 IRs per month, and you retain for 6 months, as long as you keep the live work items in the live database under 750,000, depending on how you spec the servers obviously as well, it should be a workable solution. But the key point to bear in mind here is keep retention as low as possible, and use the data warehouse because it's available. I know a lot of customers have issues and challenges with managing the data warehouse, but use it for your historic reporting and keep the live SCSM database as small as possible. That's a key recommendation I guess we can give you here. I can move on to the next slide. So a bit of advice on the connectors. So from an Active Directory connector perspective, use multiple connectors. So don't point to the root domain and discover everything. Firstly, you'll bring in a lot of data that you don't really care about, and also that connector is going to take a long time to run. Scope it by the different OUs, security groups that you are interested in, and bring in the active users that you actually want to manage, because there's no other really use. There's no use for bringing in your service accounts, etc., into Service Manager. So use LDAP queries to scope this down further. So things like this one, to bring in groups, so to not bring in groups where there's no members. So again, that's a useless group membership or useless group discovery. Use that to further refine your AD imports. So Configuration Manager, the connector is extremely useful, and if you're not using it, you should definitely use it. But again, scope that by collection. So don't use it like I showed you in my demo, point it to the all systems and bring in everything. Again, use it by collection that you're interested in. So again, these collections could be where you bring your computer records in from as well. So you don't duplicate that information by bringing in that data from AD as well. So if you have all of your computers in Config Manager, use the Config Manager connector to bring in your computer records and not AD for that. So a few do's and don'ts. So do schedule your connectors to run outside of business hours. So they can be quite processor intensive. Do run them outside of your business hours. Schedule them to run at different times as well. So do that. Ensure that they don't run concurrently at the same time to place extra load unnecessarily. A key one, don't synchronize the data that you don't need. So if you have a connector that is bringing in data for systems or data sets that you're not interested in, turn them off. Don't let them continue running for no reason. Within your connectors for AD particularly, and even for Configuration Manager, don't synchronize or check the box for not to bring in null data from these different data sources. Fundamentally, you don't want to have random null values against your records. So where it's empty in AD or the config manager data, don't bring that data in. So again, make it more efficient in terms of the way that data is brought into the system. And remember, if you remove a connector, you also remove the data that was imported by it. So a key point to bear in mind when you're managing connectors in Service Manager. So just to talk about management packs as well. So we talked about management packs being where you collect all your customization, your custom values and settings. The first and foremost recommendation we can give you is to employ a naming convention for these. So we've already talked about the recommendation that you should create your own custom connectors or custom management packs even. For every single management pack that you do create, ensure you have a naming convention for those. A good practice is to use company name, the type of management pack it is that you're going to be using, or the type of settings that you're going to be managing, and the description for those. So, for example, Cireson, the company, it's a work items management pack, and the views, it's for views that you create within the system. So use that. Use a naming convention. Doesn't matter what it is, as long as you stick to a consistent one across your management packs. Second point to mention is in terms of the creation of those management packs. If you can, so I know it's a bit of a hassle, create those management packs in the authoring tool. So the challenge, if you have created management packs out of the box from the console is behind the scenes. Service Manager gives it a name like this. So you may have called it Cireson Work Items Views or Cireson Work Item Queues, but when you export it, the XML file will be called this. So it's not very easy, intuitive to relate the exported management pack to the actual management pack that you have within the system. But if you create the management pack in the authoring tool, you can then name it correctly and ensure that when it's exported, you have the correct naming of that exported XML file as well. The other thing, a very key recommendation, because over the lifecycle of your management packs, you're going to have the unsealed management packs are going to change constantly. Make sure you back up all of your unsealed management packs on a regular basis, copy them off the server, version control them, and have them on a different system. So then if you do lose any data, you can restore very easily from those backups. So back up those unsealed management packs. There are various scripts available. So if you Google that, I think there's a Microsoft one on TechNet just to export all of your unsealed management packs to a directory, a PowerShell script. Use that. Obviously, you can find more complex ones as well, where you can schedule these and then run them on a regular basis, so that you can keep those management packs backed up, and you have some recovery if you lose some data or you mess up something within some of those management packs. So group customizations into their own management packs. So again, hopefully self-explanatory. Keep all of those customizations together. I'm sorry, we're running slightly out of time, but hopefully we can take a minute or so more. Where you've got class alterations, you customize classes in your service in your management packs. Seal them so then they can't be edited and modified again afterwards. And then use those sealed management packs to create customized unsealed management packs off the back of. So then you can have dependencies set up. So where you've customized classes, again, very important, seal them so then they are then synchronized back into the data warehouse as well. But also you can ensure that you don't lose or someone doesn't mess around with those custom classifications that you've created. Now, I know we've got I've got one question in the system in the queue, but just one final point. So we mentioned that we're going to talk about the lifecycle management of Service Manager. One of the best things you can do is have multiple systems, multiple environments for Service Manager. So you should have a test, ideally, and a production. Ideally, you should have a test dev and a production, and use those different environments to manage the lifecycle of your customizations and ensure that those are done in the right environments without affecting production. So what the lifecycle management app from Cireson enables you to do is to migrate some of those customizations or keep these environments in sync. So you may have a test or a dev environment, and very often inevitably over time, those test and dev environments are then separate. They become very different to your production environment. So with Lifecycle Management app, you can synchronize all of your production data into your test or dev environment, so you can make sure that any testing or development that you do is representative of your production environment. So that's what this is designed to do, and it's also very useful for migrating from 2012 to 2016, we found, obviously with some caveats. But it's very useful. It's most useful when you want to synchronize test, dev, production over the life cycle of your Service Manager installation. So again, that's something that we do have available for you to use if that's of interest. So I have a question here from Ramunas. How to re-import AD user, delete old connector and add new one without losing relationships with the work items? Great question. So if you delete a connector, those data sets are removed, or the imported data, except where there is a relationship. So if you have a relationship with a work item, so if you deleted your AD connector which brings in a specific user, it won't delete that user if it's related to a work item. So that's something to bear in mind. But first and foremost, always think about how you create those connectors. So at the design phase, make sure you've set up your connectors in the right way and you've scoped them to the right OUs within your system. The final thing I wanted to point you guys to was a community. So Cireson has a community website. It's a forum where Cireson employees, partners, customers share knowledge, answer questions, request new features in the Cireson products. Even if it's just to discuss the different System Center components, again, it's a great forum for that. So if you don't have access to it, please do go to community.cireson.com and you can get access via the Cireson support portal, and we can provide you an access, provide you a login, or via LinkedIn. So you can connect up with the different users of System Center components as well as Cireson products, and you can share knowledge across the different teams. So again, if you're not on the Cireson community, please do connect up and then reach out to us and get in touch. So that's everything I wanted to share with you guys today. I know we've run over time, so apologies for that. Again, so if you have to drop off, please do. The session is being recorded. But if anyone does have any further questions, I'll stay on for another 5 minutes. Please do post them, and we can discuss that now in the next 5 to 10 minutes. Again, the recording is going to be online soon, so any questions that you've missed should be as part of the recording too. But the final thing for me to say is thank you very much for your time. Apologies again for running slightly over, but hopefully you found that useful. Any questions that you may have, please do reach out. team@cireson.com is a great way of reaching out, or if you just go to our website, you can chat to one of our representatives through there as well. Or if you wanted to reach out to me, it's davis.mathai@cireson.com. Thank you again for your time, and I'll stay on, like I said, for another 5 minutes to take any further questions you may have. Thank you, Ilhami, my pleasure.